Welcome to Tech Talks, hosted by Vision Loss Alliance of New Jersey. It is that time of year again when we are faced with the iOS operating system update. With us tonight to help us decipher the new features available is Dean.
Isn't there a thing that says start video?
Yeah, is it in one video?
Top Tech Tidbits is a leading not-for-profit adaptive technology publication that reaches over 7,300 adaptive technology professionals, educators, and enthusiasts each week. You can subscribe and receive current news and trends in adaptive technology by subscribing to their newsletter. You can go to www.toptechtidbits.com to subscribe. Before I introduce our guest, I'd like to share a little about Dean. Dean Martineau has been teaching adaptive technology to people who are blind since the days of Apple IIe and the Braille and Speak. Dean has recorded tutorials, a computer magazine, and has written the Windows Keyboard Power User Guide and Get Cracking with Chrome for Windows, just to name a few of his books. Since 1999, he's been part of a team offering systems training to Social Security employees. In 2004, he created the publication Tech Tidbits for Thursday and has produced over 800 issues. Currently, Dean provides training in JSA, Windows, and iOS to individuals directly and through vocational rehabilitation agencies. Before we move on to this evening's presentation, I'd like to review our Tech Talk format. We ask that you hold your questions until Dean opens the floor to the questions. And if we can ask you to use the raise your hand feature. A quick review. For those of you who dialed in, the raise your hand feature is *9. *6 will mute and unmute you, giving you the opportunity to ask your question. If you are on a computer, Alt-Y to raise your hand. The mute and unmute command is Alt-A. Using the Zoom app on the iPad, top right, select the More option on the top of the screen and flick down to raise hand. On the iPhone, this feature is located at the bottom of the screen on the right side. And now we're honored to have with us tonight Top Tech Tidbits, Dean Martineau. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's very kind. Elsa, I appreciate the welcome, and I hope we can have a fruitful discussion here tonight about what's going on in iOS 16. It's going to be a lot of discussion, actually. I have some things to mention, but I have a feeling a lot of you know as much or more than I do, and so I think the community come in real handy here. I should have paid attention when you sent me introducing Top Tech before last or last year. My old mind doesn't grasp these things too long, but the group that's doing it now is doing a really good job, and so for the first time in 15 years, they didn't need me to produce it anymore, and so I'm real happy to step back and read it every Thursday. So iOS, I have mixed feelings about this. We could talk a little about that too. Of course, the iPhone has really revolutionized our lives, a lot of us who have it. And that isn't to say that Android phones and the Blind Shell Classic haven't done that too, but the iPhone's been doing it perhaps for longer. And it's really allows us to do all kinds of things with one device that we just wouldn't be able to do. Either we couldn't do it at all, or it would take several devices to accomplish. So when the iPhone came out, it was really a game changer. Now, every year there's a new iOS upgrade, and some years those are more exciting than others. I'm not all that excited about this one, but again, I'm open to be persuaded. And there are some definite nudges in the right direction with it that we'll talk about. The first thing, so I'm going to assume that, I guess if you're here, that you're at least interested, and chances are pretty good you use on an iPhone. The iPad update hasn't come out yet. So if you use iPad, you have that to wait for till sometime in October, although I guess it's pretty stable if you want to get into testing the beta. But an iPad OS is distinguished from iOS now, and I think they will increasingly distinguish it in terms of trying to take advantage of what the iPad offers. So I'm going to be talking about the iPhone almost exclusively because that's what I know better, although I know the iPad somewhat. I know the iPhone better, and that's the one that has been upgraded so far. I'm going to start with a pet peeve, but I may be wrong about the pet peeve, as I was sort of reading today. So one of the things, and I'm certainly not going to cover, there's hundreds of new features of one form or another, or tweaks in iOS 16. I'm not going to cover very many of them. I'm going to cover some of the ones that I think are most interesting to us who are voiceover users, which is what I'm assuming the population here is. And one of those that caught everybody's attention is that supposedly now you don't have to say punctuation marks when you dictate. Now, I get lots of messages from people dictating with their phones, and they're like a stream of text. People don't use punctuation very much, as well as they also don't correct their text very much, or as much as they perhaps should. One of the funny stories about that was people were talking on Facebook about their guy dogs, GUY dogs, because that's what the dictation picked up for guide dog. And so this guy was commenting to them about their girl dogs, and they didn't find it humorous. But anyway, we really have to be careful about this. Dictation's really good, but it's not perfect. But as far as the punctuation part goes, supposedly now we don't have to say our punctuation. And I guess I'm finding that not to be the case. And then I'm reading other people who are saying, oh, yeah, it's great. So I tested this. I really worked at it. I'm really good at using dictation and with my saying the punctuation, and I get very good, accurate results because I think I know how to do it because I use it. I use Dragon and JSay with the computer, and so dictating is not foreign to me. So I really worked at trying to dictate text in such wise to encourage the iPhone to punctuate it properly. I left pauses. I really used lots of inflection. Well, it didn't really work very well. It put in a couple periods. It was pretty good at the question mark.
It's like you did something. So like if I try to do something, like you did something with tiles.
Okay.
Can we mute ourselves, please?
Yeah, please mute if you can. If you don't, I think they'll mute you for you. But it's kind of hard for those of us who, I guess young people, I guess kids, they have all kinds of talk and crosstalk and music and stuff going on. But those of us of the age that I think most of us don't tend to like that very well. So it's distracting for people trying to hear. So when I have done this, and I have tried to really help the iPhone punctuate my dictation, it didn't do a very good job. Nowhere near good enough. But other people are saying, oh, this is wonderful. It really works great. So I don't know. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong, but I do not take this as an encouragement that we can not say our punctuation marks. I'm not planning on not saying my punctuation marks because I really think that for accuracy, if for no other reason, if I don't do it, if I want it to look decent, I'm going to have to go back through and edit the dumb thing. That's a bit of a pain. However, it's not as much of a pain as it used to be because you can edit the dictation while you're doing it. Now, with VoiceOver, unless you're using headphones, that's not going to work too well. It's really great if you have a Braille display. You can actually really do that successfully with a Braille display, and probably with headphones, but I don't think so. I think with a Braille display is going to be the best way to do it. So anyway, we can talk about whether anybody's had great results with dictation, which I suspect most of us use, not needing to say our punctuation marks. I believe we do, and I'm sure it will help. I'm sure that the people who don't, then some of their text will be punctuated, but I really don't recommend it too highly. Now, one of the things that and this is a topic of great controversy among speech synthesizer users, the voices. We've had voices added, and most importantly for some of us, they added eloquence. Eloquence is the voice that comes with JAWS. So a lot of us who've been using the computer for a long time have been using it for a long time. Some people did not and do not like it because speech synthesis is a very individual thing. Well, my favorite voice is your voice that feels like fingernails scraping across a chalkboard. So I was excited about Eloquence coming to the iPhone. And so when I installed iOS 16, I did not delay in activating Eloquence, and I didn't like it. It doesn't have the clarity, in my viewpoint, that Eloquence with JAWS does. The people discussing this on the AppleVis list, there was a real wide split. Some people really like it, and they say that it's more similar to the Eloquence that's used with NVDA, perhaps, than the Code Factory one, than it is with the Eloquence that JAWS has implemented. For whatever reason, I didn't find it gave me the clarity. I like to go fast, and since I like to go fast, I want a voice that can speed up and that I can understand. My own personal preference is Siri Voice 1. I'm sure everybody has their own preference. And so I didn't like Eloquence, but a lot of people do. And one of the things that's happening now with iOS is that third-party voices are going to be allowed. And so we may see a big increase in the number of voices we can use. They also put in some novelty voices, which I don't understand why, but maybe they're fun for somebody. And a few voices that somebody might like. A lot more voices in the English, US, and other English language categories. People, all you can do, because it's so individual, is you have to go in and try them out. Nobody can tell you what's going to be your best voice, but there's more choices. Maybe you'll like Eloquence, and maybe you'll like one of the other ones. And also, speaking of that, there are more languages available with VoiceOver now. I can't tell you what they are. I probably could, but I suspect most of us don't speak any of them. But for people who do, and this is a great accessibility advance on the part of Apple, that we have, more VoiceOver, more synthesizers, and more languages available for VoiceOver use. So that's a big improvement on the part of Apple with this, adding Eloquence. Even if I don't like it, other people do, and they may well enhance it. It's not like we're stuck with the implementation that they've put in if we can give them some constructive criticism about it. I find it personally too low in fidelity to be able to speed up the way I like to speed things up. But other people, as I say, are really enjoying it. And again, you're going to go into set your voices in the speech settings under the VoiceOver settings. Now, please mute for the time being. It's not going to be that long before I'm going to open up the floor, but it's best if people are muted. Okay, now, another thing that I know some about, and again, we're all over the map, we users, in terms of how much we've embraced this. If we were using iPhones for a long time, widgets were not part of our life. But all of a sudden, a year or two ago, we started having widgets be available. And if you got a new phone, you had widgets on the home screen. Widgets are cool. I like them, even though I don't use them very much. A widget is, if you don't know, so you'll have to have the app in order to have a widget, like there'll be a weather widget or a clock widget or a calendar widget. And the idea is that the widget shows you a little bit of the information from that app in a very accessible format right at your fingertips. And we've had widgets on the Today screen, where I think they really belong, and we've had widgets on the home screen. I personally don't like them there because I like my home screen to be nice and symmetrical, whereas widgets make it kind of asymmetrical. But that's okay. I don't have to like it. Other people really do. Now, what we can do, or so they say, is we can have widgets on the lock screen. So that really makes sense. You turn your phone on, and right there at your fingertips is a listing of your alarms, or a listing of your latest calendar, your upcoming calendar appointment, or a little bit of weather information. Right there, you don't have to go to even unlock the phone to get it. You've got it right there at your fingertips. This is not very easy to set up. I haven't tried as hard as I perhaps could. Some people have set it up, so it can be done with VoiceOver right now, but it's not effortless to do it. So I haven't done it yet. Guess widgets are not as important to me as they must be, or I would do it. But what you will do to start the setup process is once you have wake up your phone and you've got the time, you need to use the context menu gesture. This is becoming an increasingly important gesture. It's the double tap and hold, or my personal preferred method to do it is a triple tap with one finger. And that brings up different options and is becoming more and more used. And once you do that, you have a choice to, and after then you validate your phone, you put in your passcode or do Face ID, then you have a choice to add widgets. But it isn't all that straightforward yet. I'm expecting that they will improve this perhaps pretty early on with VoiceOver, this ability to do it, because as I say, it really, to me, it's the most sensible use of widgets is to have them on the lock screen. There's actually lots of possibilities. You can have all kinds of lock screens. I haven't figured out why you need to, but you can. Well, one thing this relates to the whole notion of focus. So when you're at work in one environment, you have one lock screen. When you're reading a book and you don't want to be very distracted, but maybe you can be a little bit distracted, you can have a different lock screen. All these things are possible nowadays if you want to do that. That's one of the new things that's going on in iOS 16. Another thing, and this works, and this some people might like. So with Siri, you have to have Hey Siri activated, and then you have to go into settings and enable hang up. But if you do those things, when you're on a phone and notice that the caller and everybody else is going to hear you do it, you can say, Hey Siri, hang up, and it will do it. That's the only command it will listen for, as far as I can tell. It doesn't just listen for Hey Siri when you're on the phone. But if you, and there's no way to do it with the side button or the home button. But if you do Hey Siri, hang up, it will hang up the phone for you. So that's kind of a nice accessibility improvement. Siri, we can now tell it to stop delaying our texts. So if you pretty much know how to do texts, you dictate your text, you give your text to Siri. You don't really feel like you need to have Siri ask you if you really want to send it. You just want to send it. So you can turn on this feature that allows for automatic send of messages. And then when you dictate a message, Siri just sends it. So that can be an enhancement. Another thing that's new in Siri that I think some people really might like, you know how when you're saying things to Siri, you have to say them pretty quickly and pretty articulately. For example, you have to, like if you're telling Siri to call a phone number, you have to say it quickly and fully. You can't, let's see, Siri, call 709 652. Well, by the time you've done that, Siri's already not listening anymore. So now you can slow this down so that Siri will not rush so quickly to process your results. And that's in settings under the Siri settings under delay. You can set a different delay for Siri to respond. do what you're trying to say. So that's an improvement. Something interesting that I haven't done much with in my environment, but it could be a game changer, is door detection. Door detection is found under magnifier settings. And while it doesn't appear to work perfectly, it can really help you, solve that problem of, okay, GPS gets you to the last 30 or 40 feet, but then how do you get from there to the door? And how do you even know where the door is? And how do you know which door? Well, door detection apparently can solve a lot of those problems. It'll read some signs on doors. It'll tell you information about the door. It does say, apparently from what I've been reading and hearing, it isn't absolutely infallible. None of this stuff's going to be, but it's pretty cool. That's probably the major orientation mobility related feature that has come into iOS 16. And people can do it people use it in their home, and people use it when traveling, and all kinds of things for detecting doors and getting some information about them. So some other miscellaneous short things before I open this up for discussion and questions. We can talk iOS in general and also iOS 16 in particular here. It has always been a major pain to delete contacts, to the point where I've got all kinds of contacts, all kinds of people who've gone home to their maker, and I just haven't gotten around to taking them out of contacts because it's too much of a pain. Well, it's much easier now. You have to hit, once you got the contact, you hit edit, but then right there at the bottom is delete contact. You don't have to scroll and try to come up with a delete contact button that may or may not appear. So it's a much more straightforward process to delete contacts. And I think there may even be a simpler way to do it, but already I see that I may have some contact deletion in my future because it's just much easier nowadays than it was. Something else you can do with contacts, I wish it worked better than it does, is you can create contact lists. So whatever list you want to build for whatever name you want to build it, a church list or a hobby group or whatever it wants to, whatever, anything and everything you can add contacts to a list. You can't apparently send a text to that list unless all those people are iOS users. That's a limitation that they have, that they stick with in Apple. But what you can do is you can email the list just by sending a mail to that list. So that's that could be a really nice feature. And there's a couple of reasons now with iOS why you might want to use the mail program more, and that's one of them. Speaking of that, and I never felt a really strong need to do this, but maybe I will. You can delay sending a message. You can write a message, but you really don't want to send it now. You can do this with Outlook on the computer. You can do it with Gmail on the web interface. Now you can do it with the mail program. You just, before sending, you use the context menu again on the send button, and it gives you a choice about delaying sending, and you can specify when you want the message sent. Another thing you can do before you send the message now in email is you can specify that you want to be reminded about a particular message. So when you get a message, you want to reply to it, but you don't want to reply right now, but you don't want to forget it. You can set a reminder, they offer you some generic times, or you can really get down and choose the time. And a reminder folder is then created in the email folders, and you are reminded at that particular moment about sending the email. So that's an enhancement of the email program. Some similar things are happening with both email and text messages. You can delay sending an email. Obviously, not a lot, but you can delay sending an email, and you can recall emails and texts for a very short time. and you can edit messages only if you're sending a message to somebody on iOS. Actually, not only on iOS, but iOS 16. If it's any earlier iOS, they're just going to see that you edited the messages, but it's not going to really change anything for them. But it's, again, sometimes we send a message we didn't mean to, hit that send button. I tend to do the opposite. I tend to create messages and then think I sent them, but then I really didn't send them. And then I wonder why the person doesn't answer them. And then I find out it's because I didn't hit the send button. So that's another sign of aging. But anyway, so we have those choices. If you use voice control is really a good thing for people who you have total, once you go into voice control, you have total control over your device with speech. You can navigate, you can send texts and email messages. And now what you couldn't do before, which is one of the reasons I gave it up, now you can actually spell. So when some complicated word is coming along in your message and you know that the system isn't going to get it right, you can spell it. You can go into a spell mode and spell the message. So, so I'm looking at my notes here. As I say, there's an awful lot of new stuff in this update. And if somebody has a feature that they're excited about or wants to know about, we can discuss it. But that kind of gives us an overview of what I know and what I find interesting. And the other thing, of course, to know is that we're in the early stages of iOS 16, and things tend to get fixed and updated pretty quickly. In a way, you kind of wish we weren't all beta testers, but we are. And so 16.1 is already well in beta phase, and it'll be out soon if it isn't already. I don't think it is, but some of the enhancements will come, and I think that voiceover fixes will come with this. For a little while, it was you couldn't use the magic tap in that beta cycle, but now they've fixed that. All right, so why don't we then, well, let's unmute people and take any questions or discussions. What's your favorite new thing about iOS 16? What do you have questions about? And we'll see if we can help each other.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Linda. Thank you, Dean. We'll open the floor for questions. So if you could please just raise your hand and I'll choose you one at a time. Not everybody at once.
You're right. Nice.
Come on, raise your hand.
Everybody.
We have to have questions. Ginny, you are first up. Ginny?
I'm sorry, I had to unmute.
Oh,
you
yes.
mentioned about the double tap and triple tap. I didn't know what that was.
That's been there for a while, and it's really important to try it out and to use it because it's used all kinds of places. When you read documentation for sighted users who aren't using VoiceOver, it's tap and hold. When we do it, it's double tap and hold or triple tap with one finger. And it brings up all kinds of options in all kinds of places.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ginny. Next up, we have Aaron.
Well, one annoying iOS 16 bug with VoiceOver is the app switcher bug, and that's for those who don't have those who don't have a home button. So when you pull up the app switcher, it's like weird. Like it shows name. I actually called Apple Accessibility about this. So it's like weird to close the app. You actually gotta swipe to the right, then swipe up with three fingers to close the app. It's like really weird.
Now, are you using Invert Colors by any chance?
No, I'm not.
Okay, because that's definitely a bug for people who are using Invert Colors. But the impression I had was that wasn't a problem. But I see things that I sort of just let things go by sometimes, and I haven't seen a trend of that. but I do think I do think there are some problems there. And it's good that you called Apple Accessibility to report it. That is the thing to do. I mean, we can talk here and people can talk on Apple Viz and all that stuff. But in order to start the ticket process, we have to make a courteous and firm call to Apple Accessibility or send them an email and describe and document the problem.
Yep. I called Apple's Accessibility, and they ran diagnostic. They have diagnostic files. They took diagnostic files on my device.
Yeah, that's that's exactly the thing to do, and hopefully in 16.1 or 16.2 it'll get fixed.
Thank you, Aaron. Next up, Vincent, if you can please unmute.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much. And
Hello.
thank you very much for being frank on your opinions concerning the iPhone. I'm one of those that waited for a long time. I actually skipped Blueberries, waiting for Apple to come up with the iPhone, and it was incredible. I mean, the technology that we have.
I agree. I'm not an Apple fanboy. Some things that they do kind of annoy me, but I mean, really, that device, for all the things you can do, and I don't even do most of the things you can do, is amazing.
But several of the items, I think that in many instances, unfortunately now, and in order to please shareholders and all the brouhaha and all that, they are rushing through many of the projects, and that would include not only hardware, with the eternal rushing to come up with a new product so new sales can be generated, but also to modify, to update the operating systems. So I definitely, I have been weary about getting a phone without the home button. I have what is it? A 20
SE2020.
Actually, I have the SE 2020, and I'm quite pleased with that. And items like not being able to use the app switcher, the way the bugs. If you use classic invert, I cannot see, I cannot read anything, but I can distinguish shades, and so I use the smart invert, and it gives me just maybe a false sense of security. If you want, I'm pretty comfortable, and that's one of the reasons why I haven't switched to a phone that has just the Face ID or the digital ID. But the other thing is that there are some items, for example, the GPS system innovation. I was listening to a podcast or to a comment earlier today about the use of two sources for GPS location. Instead of the one that is traditionally used, and being tested, and how there is very little difference in that. Now, I'm usually when I travel, when my wife drives me somewhere, I'm the one that does the navigating. I'm the one that uses maps or Google Maps and gets the directions and everything. And many times, we have all had experiences where the directions are not they're incorrect, actually, sometimes. I mean, it's not only dictation, it's not only punctuation. There are a few items that don't have to do with the iOS system, perhaps directly, but with other programs that they are accessing. So that makes me weary. And about punctuation, I guess I don't use it because I also tested it, and I worked with Siri. I use dictation primarily. I always have to go back to it because Siri does its own interpretation many times, and especially if I'm communicating with people concerning business or the government or what have you, but with friends and with other people. I used to, in the beginning, I was sending messages without checking them. And my gosh, I mean, when people told me they couldn't understand what I had said, and I went back and tried to read what I had sent, I couldn't understand it myself. I had no idea what I was talking about. So, I mean, that's extreme. And yes, a lot of it has to do with pausing at the right time, enunciation, et cetera, but still, I am more comfortable by having more control rather than less control over certain aspects of Siri and the phone itself. And the other one is more of a question. Now, for some time, iOS for the iPhone and the iPad were the same operating systems. Am I correct, or am I making assumptions?
Oh no, they were until like 2 years ago.
Right. So now, does that mean that all the apps that are that we use would have to be modified for the iOS for the iPad and iOS for the phone? So that's now another step that has to be taken by programmers.
Well, yeah. If somebody's a third-party app, if they want it to be used with the iPad, and a lot of them are going to want to do that, so they're going to take that step, as I understand it. I'm not a programmer, but and I have a couple of things to say about what you talked about, but before that, but yeah, the like notes for the iPad, and looks different than notes on the iPhone, for example. That's an example I know, because there's simply some things you can do with an iPad that for display purposes that you can't do on an iPhone. So I am not a big fan. The iPad isn't my favorite device. It is some people's favorite device. It isn't mine. I happen to be fortunate enough to have a Braille tablet, so I use that because I'm a Braille user and it's just more comfortable for me. But yeah, the iPad is somewhat diversifying from the iPhone because it has its own operating system. And I'll be interested to see what they do with iPad OS 16. You mentioned, okay, that I really don't like Face ID, and I am not at all happy about the everybody moving away from the home button. Everybody's doing it, not just Apple, whether Apple started it or what, but it's possible to find Android phones with a home button, but I'm not sure how long that will be the case. The SE 2022 is apparently a pretty capable phone, but one of the problems that we start having now is that a lot of these features that they're coming out with are only going to work on the newer phones. So for example, the door detection thing, if that's something anybody's interested in, is only going to work on phones with LiDAR, which pretty much means if I recall, the 12 Pro and Pro Max and up, maybe 11 Pro had it, but otherwise the other phones, even the small phones, don't have LiDAR. I always wondered if LiDAR was going to be useful, and I think it's going to perhaps start being useful in something, if that kind of a feature is something that you want to use. And for example, the hang up Siri thing doesn't work. I don't know about the SE 2022. I suspect it works on that, because that's actually a pretty high-end phone. Does not work on any phone lower than, I believe it's an 11. So they're kind of forcing you, and it's only sensible, I guess, as they develop this technology, they develop phones that will use it. Some of the features they add don't work on the older phones. The older phones may take iOS 16, but some of the features aren't going to work on those phones. So, but I'm not a fan. Yes, I can use the home button and all that all this stuff without a physical home button, but I don't like it as well. It's just not the same experience. So, for me anyway, can't teach some old dogs new tricks, at least not very effectively.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Next up, we have Ashley.
Yeah, hi. I think
Hi
that's me, right? Yeah.
That's
Okay.
you.
Yeah, I'm Ashley. Yeah. Hi. Well, this is all interesting. I I I did not grow up with touch screens. I'm younger probably than a lot of people here, as you might tell from my voice, but I didn't grow up with like touch screen devices. And the experience I have with the iOS is actually more on the iPad than an iPhone. Although I do use iPhones sometimes because I can use them in like most of my family has them, but they don't have iOS 16. So this is interesting. So I just mentioned that as background. For me, touch screens and gestures are a big challenge to learn because they're kind of finicky. 2 fingers does something and then 3 fingers does something else. So anyway, my questions are about features I believe that are improved from what I've heard, they're improved or new in iOS 16. Number 1 is, can you speak about the maps feature and how have they updated the maps because things change all the time, and how does somebody who doesn't see the screen well use them since it's visual? I know voiceover. I wonder what voiceover would say, and secondly, you mentioned GPS. I guess I'm wondering what same things. What does Apple put in their GPS product? Does it give you like pretty accurate turn by turn directions, and like will it tell you specific things like what you're passing by, like locations around you, stuff like that? I know car GPSs do. And what would you say about any improvements or lack of improvements to the standard apps? Mainly, I'm wondering in regard to the recording app and the not calendar. I mean to say the recording and the notes app that are there. So thanks. I know that's a lot so far.
Well, I'll do the best I can with that. My living situation now is such that I don't use GPS very much. So it's kind of, I'm not a very good judge of that as I might have been 7 or 8 years ago. Because of just the place where I live, there's not a lot of accessible places to go. I mean, you can't, traffic patterns and streets and sidewalks around here, I'd have to want to do it pretty badly. And I have alternatives, so I don't have to do that. And things don't work very well around here. So maps is actually, and I haven't done much of this, but for some time, you've been able to use maps with voiceover and, drag your finger across a map. And they did a good job of this, so you can get a feel for what the route is like and, what streets are, what's next. I do not think that Apple Maps or Google Maps are going to give you the kind of proximity information. But again, I haven't used it a lot. I've tended to use an app called Blind Square that does cost. And with that, you can use that in conjunction, because what Blind Square doesn't do is Blind Square doesn't give you turn-by-turn directions. But Google Maps and Apple Maps both do. And there have been enhancements in Apple Maps. For example, apparently it's more tightly integrated with some transit systems now, so that you can get an idea of perhaps locations of bus stops and bus fares, and some of this kind of thing is available through Apple Maps. And you can, I don't remember what the enhancements are, to be honest with you. So I'm not a very good source for that. It's worth looking into, and sometimes all you can do is just try things. But I always liked the combination of Apple Maps or Google Maps. I tend to prefer Google Maps and Blind Square, because Blind Square will give you all that information of what's around if you want. It'll give you as much or as little as you want. of what you're passing and how far things are and all this sort of thing, more so than in I believe the commercial, the standard GPS apps.
Okay. Oh,
and as far as, let's see, other enhancements, what did you talk? Notes. Notes has a search and replace feature now, and what Notes also has is collaboration features. You can actually be collaborating with somebody on a note, and I don't know how VoiceOver handles this, but you can have your text that you write is going to be in one color, and your collaborator's text is going to be in another color. As I say, I haven't done this, so I don't know how VoiceOver handles it, but so that's been enhanced. I'm not aware of any enhancements in Voice Recorder. It got some enhancements last year, but I'm not aware of any enhancements. And your comment about gestures, nobody in here started out using gestures. I suspect everybody who's using an iPhone had to start from scratch because at whatever age, because nobody was doing this. And and gestures are just something you have to master. And luckily, there's a lot of facilities in the program in VoiceOver to do that. In terms of just you're just competing with yourself. So go into that help feature with 4-finger double tap and just practice gestures and see if it says you did it. And if you didn't, keep practicing it until you do. So it's you can teach yourself a lot about it. It does take time and energy to do that, but it's time and energy well spent, because then you can really use the phone or the iPad more confidently.
Right. Did they do anything with FaceTime? I'm not sure how they could update it any more, though, personally, than they've already done. But other than being more clear,
some stuff that you can. They have done some juggling there. Some of the stuff, and this is why after I offered to do this presentation, I kind of wondered if I should have, because there's a lot of the things that one can do on these devices that I have no interest in doing, so I don't learn to use them very much. So with FaceTime and also with iMessage, you can share now. You can share songs, assuming everybody's a subscriber to Apple Music. You can be listening to the same song together. You just send a request and your contact, and you can just be sitting there listening to a song. For example, that I know that you can do. They've also shuffled things around in the Messages app, which is kind of related. But you can still do voice recording, but it's in a different. It's not as obvious as it was before to send a voice message, but you can still do it.
Oh, and that's good to know. You can still, because I like that feature of voice messages.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's still there.
I'm still glad it's still there, because that'd be sad for it to be gone.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling me what you could about the maps feature, and you're right. I guess it's a matter of getting maybe a demonstration. So maybe if some person that uses VoiceOver I know can show me their maps, then I'll find out a little bit more.
Probably a good comprehensive one, which I perhaps could have studied more when I was getting ready for this. If you're on with Jonathan Moson's podcast, he did a whole thing about iOS, new features in iOS 16. And so if there's something new about maps, he will have talked about it. And he did an episode about that.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. Because I guess I do listen to Jonathan Moson, but the last thing he did in regard to iOS was iOS 13. So
that was his book. He doesn't do those anymore.
Right.
But he still likes to dabble in it, and he had a podcast episode all about what's new in iOS 16, and he did a lot of demonstrations. He demonstrated door detection and lots of things. He did a lot of demonstrations in a very comprehensive way, as he tends to do. So And so I think, and I don't recall if he talked about maps, but if it's worth talking about, he will have talked about it. The other place, of course, is Apple Viz. If they're going to be doing more and more podcasts, according to the gent that did they had a couple of podcasts about, one was iOS 16 voiceover features, and one was just iOS 16 features in general. And they promised that they're going to be doing mini podcasts about a lot of those features. So.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think based on what I hear people saying, yes, I think some of us, that's news to us. So about regarding Apple Viz and Jonathan Wilson's updated.
This is the area that, try as they might, Android hasn't managed to achieve, as far as I'm concerned. There's one good Android podcast, but there isn't an Apple Viz for Android. There are various people who have tried it and tried to become that, but they haven't succeeded. And Apple Viz has apparently has done an awful lot of things right over the last, I don't know how long it existed, 8 or 9 years, to become a really solid source of information.
Thank you, Ashley, for that question and all those topics. Negi, you had your hand up.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I updated the phone. There is 16.2 out last week.
Oh, okay.
And I have problem with the contact. You can't go, like, if you go from letter to letter A, B, C, D, you can't do it now. Like, it go up and down. And I did call and I talked to them, and he said, they will notice that, yes. So
now how are you doing it? Were you using headings?
Yeah, like when you go to contact and then you would like to use the letter you want to go to, you can't. Like, it move and you go to, say, iCloud, meeting, it go to different things. And
okay, there's two ways to do that, and I'm trying to figure out which way you're using. Are you using headings, or are you using the scrolling feature where you can run your finger down the screen and stop it at a letter?
Yeah, that's what I do. Try to scrolling down.
Have you tried using do you know about using headings on the rotor?
Yes.
Okay, I think probably more people use that. Once you get into contacts, change your rotor to headings and then flick up and down and see if it will let you navigate from letter to letter. It's not quite as fast as what you're doing, but it's pretty good. I mean, you can, if it's still working in that version, you can get up and down pretty successfully.
I mean, compared to some people.
Yes, I used to do it before, but I don't know why it's changed. Like, I noticed it's changed now when 16.2 came.
Yeah, well, Apple does a good job, but yet accessibility still isn't fundamentally there as where we might like it to be in terms of, absolutely before anything else, they check accessibility. That doesn't happen that way quite. They do a really good job, but it's imperfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Negi. Next up, we have Stacy.
You mentioned you had a Braille tablet.
Yeah, it's frightfully expensive, the one I have. It's the Braille Sense 6, which I'm always happy to talk about if anybody ever is interested in such things, but it's from HIMS, and it's an Android tablet for what that's worth, but it has a lot of built-in apps, as well as you can use Android apps to do things, and it's
because I have a Braille app on my iPad, but I don't know how to use it. It's like an added feature. I'm like, I don't know how to use this. I don't have a Braille display. I have a Braille light, but it's no longer working.
Well, no, those are pretty out of date.
Well, every so often I get it refurbished and it works fine. I send it back, gets refurbished, works fine.
Where do you send it to do that?
I send it to say, the main headquarters down in St. Petersburg. You refurbish it and it comes back as good as new.
That's if that's true, because I don't have one
It's
anymore.
a 2000.
Yeah, see, if that's true, that's a real credit to that organization, because
Yeah.
Humanware isn't supporting. Humanware is not. Go ahead.
I haven't done it in a while, but the last,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, it may not be true now. And part of it is they can't get parts for those things anymore. But for example, people who have the Braille Note Apex basically can't get that thing serviced anymore, as I understand it.
Really?
And it's not that. I mean, it's an old device, but it isn't that old a device. And if there's people whose apexes are starting to die are stuck. HIMS is still supporting their U2 line of products.
Now, where are they based, HIMS?
They're out of Korea, but the U.S. office is in San Antonio or Austin.
Oh, Austin. Okay.
Yeah.
Stacy, that might be a really great topic for another tech talk.
And also, my nephew works for Apple.
It would specifically involve a lot of people who have those Braille devices. Do you have any other questions about the iOS 16 update for the iPhone?
Yeah, I don't have an iPhone, but my mom does. Is there any, you mentioned some of the new voices besides the Eloquence? Because I think the voice I use for Siri is the male voice, and it sounds human to me. But then the voiceover voice is kind of sounds, I guess it would be similar to Siri, but it doesn't sound exactly like.
Well, that's
like the Eloquence, because I have Eloquence on I have JAWS on my desktop. Sorry.
Right. The voices are so individual because you can play with the pitch too on these things. And I find that Siri Voice 1, which is the male voice, works well, but that's me, and that doesn't make any difference because for you, it may not, or it may sound somehow different. You may hear some difference that I don't hear, and vice versa. So,
when I use the male voice on Siri, it sounds human. But when it goes to voice, when it's not the Siri speaking, it's the screen reading part of the voiceover, it sounds like very similar to, I'm going to say Eloquence, but it's not Eloquence. Similar, but same.
Again, you can change the pitch and you can change the rate much more than you can with Siri.
I think I updated the 15 something. It's not 16 yet. Okay. I don't know what version my mom has on the iPhone because she doesn't always update it. Whoever, if it says to be updated, it's usually a massive.
People just ignore it. Right away. Right. Yeah.
Stacey, you have an iPad, correct?
I have two iPads. My mom has an iPad and an iPhone.
And did you not say that the iOS 16 comes out a little later for the iPad?
Yeah, iPad OS 16 isn't out yet. You can get it in beta if you want to. It's no problem, and apparently it works pretty well. But if you're waiting for the public release, it isn't out yet.
You said October.
October, yeah. They've said October, and I suspect they will. There's some possibility that there was even going to be another Apple event. I guess there may not be now. I don't know, but maybe talking about new iPads or something. I don't know, but yeah, the iPad OS isn't out yet for iPad OS 16.
I've been having issues recently, like today, like the speaker. I don't know what it was, but it was cutting out when you were talking. I had to keep turning it so it didn't sound like the speaker was cutting out.
Well, that might be a hardware problem. I don't know.
I used Zoom on last week, and it wasn't doing that.
Yeah, these things are tricky, and it could be a hardware problem depending on what iPad you're using and how long you've been using it and how you've treated it and all kinds of things.
I turned it off recently, and
that's also a good thing to do, is simply to restart it. Shut it off and restart it.
Back. Well, well, this is the weird thing. When I turned it back on before I went on to Zoom, it said restarting or resetting. And I'm like, what the hell is it saying resetting? Like, why is it saying resetting? I'm like, what? Like, I don't know why it said that.
Yeah,
It should have said, it should have just said, type in the unlock code. That's all it should have said. Or whatever was on the home screen. But it shouldn't have said that.
Well, this I suspect you do already, but it's probably really good to work with Apple accessibility on this stuff. They're pretty knowledgeable. Some more than others, but pretty knowledgeable.
Yeah,
and
if it keeps acting up, I'll have someone from Apple Viz look at because what happened recently.
I'm not Apple Viz. I'm talking about calling Apple accessibility.
Stacy, I'll make sure you get that number tomorrow.
I think I have it somewhere.
Okay, that might be good because it's hard to troubleshoot what's happening with your iPad when none of us really.
It's actually impossible to troubleshoot that we don't have enough information.
Very true. Okay, thanks, Stacy. I'm going to go on. We have some more questions. Matthew, you have been patiently waiting.
Yes, about the GPS app, about the Apple Maps app. We did a study with a class I had at Visualist Alliance. We were talking about I took 2 trips, one to the food store and the hardware store, and as it was past each house, it would announce the number and the intersection I was crossing. So let that one person know about the apps app.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, that's I can honestly say I've never used turn-by-turn directions as a pedestrian with maps, and they have continued to improve it over the years. So
it was like 201 Oak Street, 19 Oak Street, and coming to number 1 First Avenue.
It doesn't necessarily tell you. It doesn't necessarily tell you that you're coming to a business name, but it'll tell you the address. That's already really good.
Yeah, like I thought, I was going to the food store and then the hardware store.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you,
so
everyone.
That's good. That's very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, you
I see you guys tomorrow.
Bye, Matthew. Lori. Lori, you have your hand up?
I know she has a question about the Dexcom.
I thought I was unmuted. Can you hear me now?
There you go. You're there.
That's better.
For Siri, you're also going to be able to say shut down and restart.
That's right. You can do that. I forgot about that little detail. That's and of course, now the other thing that's really cool that I didn't mention, because it's only related to one phone, if you buy a 14 Pro, when you turn on and off your phone, you have to set this on under accessibility settings, but you get a sound telling you that the phone has turned on and that the phone has shut down. How many of us have spent how much time worrying about, okay, is the phone actually going to come on? I mean, nowadays, not so much. Nowadays, they pretty much do. And if you have your phone plugged in, you get a tone when it comes on. But that's a nice feature.
Thank you, Lori. Ashley, you have another question?
Yeah, hi. Firstly, there's Stacy and anyone else having problems. I think she was talking about a hardware problem. So yeah, I think calling Apple accessibility is a great idea. And Linda, by the way, if you could maybe email me that number too, because I was gonna call Apple accessibility at some point as well. Yeah, that'd be really helpful because I'm in the same boat as I think her name was Stacy, because my family, my mom, my dad has I think an iPhone, but I don't. Anyway, so I know how that feels when family has the iPhones and then you are trying to debate whether you're going to get your own iPhone, whether you can afford it. But anyway, my real question is, Dean, I've heard, speaking of all this thing about, well, actually 2 questions. Siri, number 1 is, there are great enhancements, which is cool. I guess I'm wondering in general, to get the best, like, say, dictation and for her to understand you, I guess my question is, how close are you supposed to be to a phone or your device to pick it up? Because I've heard that it's getting better at listening for you in the room, kind of like the Amazon the Amazon, Echo does. So I'm wondering about that, like how close do you need to be for communication? And my second question was,
let me answer that first one.
Still have iTunes.
Let me answer the first one, and then you can ask the second one, because I have something I forgot to say earlier anyway, in regard, and I cannot remember the gentleman's name that we talked about dictation a little bit. I hope he's still here. It's really good if you really want to dictate text, you can use Siri, but you don't necessarily want to. If you're in an app like text messages or email, there's a dictation button that brings up iOS Apple Dictation, which is higher quality, has higher quality recognition than Siri does. So when it comes to text recognition, yeah, we can send messages and email messages using Siri, but I tend to think that when we're doing it for serious messages and want to have a better chance that the message is going to be more accurately transcribed, we're going to use iOS dictation. So I would open up the app, open up whichever app you're working in, Notes, Messages, Messenger, whatever, and then activate the dictation button, or more easily than that, use the the magic tap, the 2-finger double tap to start dictation. You're going to get better results. As to how close or how far you should be, it really should be pretty normal, pretty natural. Obviously, if you're farther away, if you're trying to use Siri across a room and you're trying to send a message, your accuracy level is going to go down. If you're close, so you want to be, you don't need to be, you don't want to have the microphone. There's no reason to have it like shoved up against your mouth. If that's not natural, and people wouldn't do it. It's designed to work, like on a table, and you're sitting there, and the phone is sitting there and with face up, or you can use it. Probably I haven't done as much of that, but just use it like as if you were talking on the phone. But it's just normalcy is the guideline. These are not designed. They're designed to work with just sort of normal posture and normal operation.
Right. And you made a good point about the dictation, and I have used that. If there's a dictation button,
there always is. There's always a dictation button.
Yeah, very good points to remind us all to use that built-in dictation button. Okay. Yeah, and I was just going to ask you if iTunes was still available on the next iOS thing. And when did you say iPad OS was coming out? I can't remember. Thanks.
It'll be sometime in October. Nobody talks much about iTunes anymore because the emphasis is so much on iCloud backups. But so I'm sure iTunes probably still works. Most of us don't like it very well, but it still works.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley. Do we have any other questions? Questions or comments? It's about 8:15.
Okay. Well, if you guys decide to do something on Braille tablets or that, I'd be real happy to be involved with that. I have hymns ones.
Is it possible for you to give out your email address or some way to contact you? I also have some questions regarding your experience with the Braille Sense, because I'm looking for an updated Braille display, because kind of I'm in the boat, like you said earlier, HumanWare won't support my old thing anymore, my old Braille Apex, whatever it's called.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you could tell us how to reach out.
My email is I used to have a business called Top Dot Enterprises, and I figure I'm the top dot in the Braille cell. So my email address is topdot, TOPDOT @gmail.com. So yeah, feel free to drop me a note. There's not a whole lot of options, but there are some. It really depends on what you want to do, on what you're, and there are some options. So yeah, just drop me a note. We can figure it out.
That could be a good topic for another time.
Yeah, I think it could, because there's a
you.
lot going on in it.
Sure. And everyone has different interests. All right. Well, if no one has any other questions, I just want I want us all to thank Dean very much for being with us tonight, talking about the iOS 16 update. Thank you for this presentation. In closing, I just always want to remind everyone to join the VLANJ Facebook page specifically for Tech Talks too. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel, because you will have an opportunity to listen to our presentations. There's a lot of information that was given tonight, so you might need to listen again. So just subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you will have access to the recordings of all of the different programs. Dean, we thank you again. And
thank you very much.
Everyone a very good night. Good night and stay well.
Thank you all.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everyone. See you on November 2nd for our next one.